frankly, the thing about it is that when you're up on stage, you're not truly yourself. I know we all talk about you should be your authentic self, but you're really not. You are you on stage. Hi, and welcome to the Creative Solutions Podcast, where we interview cutting-edge creative artists, entrepreneurs, and innovators who are changing the world. We also bring you tips and techniques that you can implement. This episode is brought to you by my favorite productivity hack, the Brain FM app, this podcast's hosts, Podbean, as well as my book, Speak From Within. Hello, and welcome to the Creative Solutions Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. This is a bonus episode. One of the things that I've been doing is really doubling and tripling down on my first love, which is theater and musical theater and writing for musical theater and directing theater and all things theater. And I am taking the lessons that I'm learning from watching shows and studying the staging and the acting and the direction and the production as a whole, individual actors, and seeing how their preparation and their process informs what I do as a writer, as a workshop facilitator, as a consultant with companies on innovation and ideation, and seeing how all of that I learn watching these shows can bring new information and new ways of doing things for me, and by extension you, because I'm doing podcast episodes based on this every single time I see a show. And so last night I saw at the MCC Theater The Lonely Few. It's billed as a new rock musical, and it is tremendous. It is, I'm not gonna put any spoilers in there. I enjoyed the heck out of it, and here's why. One of the things that I'm fascinated by is this notion, and I've been talking about this a lot, is communicating things to people in the way they need to hear it, right? So as we communicate whatever it is we communicate, in order to do it effectively, in order to do it so that it actually works, we have to know our audience, and we have to study our audience, and we have to talk to the people we're talking to in the best way for them. Not necessarily for us, but for them. What's interesting about studying musical production like The Lonely Few, which is about a sort of a rock band, kind of rock band, in somewhere in the USA South, and what happens to the people in the band and other characters that are tangential and sometimes very important to the story. And the thing that struck me as I watched this is how you present something isn't at all, or even mostly, about what you're saying. And I've talked about this Dr. Albert Mehrabian's 738-55 rule, that 7% of how someone takes in information is the words that are used, 38% is the tone, the intonation, and 55% is body language. Well, when I look at that and I sort of extrapolate that out into a production, one of the things that becomes almost a character in the show is the staging, is the actual set that's designed in order to bring the show to fruition. And there's a sort of a famous meme that goes around periodically that without the tech people, without the lighting designers and the sound designers, the actors would be standing in the dark and looking at an empty audience house, and no one could hear them, right? That's the point, is that without the tech people, without the people who provide you the light and the sound so that the people in the audience can hear what you're saying, you're going to be standing in an empty stage in the dark. Well, the staging itself also becomes a character and becomes very important, particularly when the set designer, probably working in concert with the director, really takes chances. And there are some sort of set designs you'll see that are very sparse, that don't have a lot going on. And that's totally cool. I remember seeing Peter and the Starcatcher, and how in order to form a ship, for example, they took what looked like tiles or paper, cardboard, and they formed it. right? And spoiler, 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 in The Lion King, the musical, when you're about to see Mufasa, Mufasa is formed from the stars that the various characters are sort of moving around in the sky, and all of a sudden, it all comes together and you see Mufasa. And the thing about that is, for me, is that when you're doing that, it approximates in the Broadway show, The Lion King, it approximates what happens in the movie. There's no way to bring it together in the movie, in the Broadway show, the way they brought it together in the movie, because those kinds of effects weren't available when they designed everything. But it's still it's such a beautiful and lovely surprise when you see that bit of staging done, that bit of action done in the musical, and it made me cry like a baby. Okay, so yes, that's part of it. But last night in The Lonely Few, I looked at the attention to detail in the set. I looked at they had sort of seeming graffiti or things written in neon, that every single thing that was written was in support of, in the service of the story. Every single thing that you see, I bet you if I went through and I looked at all of the different ways the lights were set up, and it had Mardi Gras beads hanging off a light fixture, and it had words up above that if you took the time to look way up high, you'd be able to see them. Otherwise, you wouldn't see them at all. But it was part of the atmosphere. It was part of the environment that the set designer and the director and the rest of the production team put together in order for us to have a more immersive experience, because the entire set it's as if you are sitting in a bar, essentially, and the main band in the show is essentially a bar band. And so to make the staging even more fun, the stage that the band plays on is only part of the stage. The other part of the stage of the theater, tables and chairs for patrons to sit. And of course, audience members get to go up and sit in those tables and chairs. And I love how they put it, that this is an immersive experience, but not an interactive one. In other words, the actors are going to run around between the tables and do things, but you're not touching them. You're not interacting with them at all. But the point is that they are right. If you're sitting up on stage at one of the tables, they're right there with you. You're right there with them, and it's a visceral experience to see that. And it felt a little voyeuristic, actually. I felt a little bit like, I'm getting to see the behind the curtain, if you will. Right, there's you see the band playing, and they're great. The whole band itself is playing, and it's great. And I think that the musicians who were playing weren't playing actual instruments. In other words, the people on stage playing weren't the musicians who were playing the music. They were singing it, but not playing it, I think. Because there was a band behind the stage that was actually playing the music, which, regardless, the illusion was awesome and it worked great. And if you play guitar, you can see that what the person was doing on electric guitar wasn't the rhythm that was being played. And that's okay. I'm not asking for them to be perfect hard rock musicians. I not at all. But the point is that immersive experience allowed us to see the band play, and then when the set is over and they're the people, not the band, it allows the mask to drop. And that's always fascinated me too. Because who you are on stage, everyone talks about authenticity, schmocenticity. I don't even know how to say that, sounding appropriately harumphy. Because, frankly, the thing about it is that when you're up on stage, you're not truly yourself. I know we all talk about you should be your authentic self, but you're really not. You are you on stage. Even if you are you as authentically as you possibly can be, you're still just a little bit performative. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Nobody wants to hear you come out and say, "Oh, I had the worst time popping this zit on my back." No one wants to hear that. So we don't talk about that stuff. We don't put that front and center. If it's dramatic, great. If it's passionate, great. If it's great music, great. If it's uncovering the human experience, great. But the mundanity of it all, we don't really do. And that's fine. But in this show, You got to see, as soon as the set was over and the characters were, who were the musicians, were off the stage and sort of interacting with each other as people, you got to see the mask fall off and you got to see them, who they really are, their frustrations, their fears, and what they're feeling within the context of the play. And that way you have a show within a play. And it was lovely and intimate and touching and dramatic and sometimes traumatic, which I really appreciated, having been a professional musician and having lived not the bar band life, that's not the kind of music I played, but having lived a life where you're touring and you're playing often in places where nobody gives a crap that you're there, because the venue hires you and you're going to play, and that's okay. But it's not something that is, oh my God, I can't wait to hear you. It's not me they're coming to see. They're coming to see whoever the entertainer is for the day or the week or the month or whatever. And there were times when I used to play the college circuit. I used to play a community college. Let's hear Community College of Dundalk, Maryland. I was there for an open mic every month. That was my role every month for the entire year. I'd come in and I would host the open mic for the students to come in and perform. And we ended up having amazing times singing, and this is a very international campus, so we would have people from all over the world singing and performing the music from their homelands. And it was unbelievably amazing. The diversity, people being vulnerable enough to share, even when they were scared. We had one woman who came in and she was from India, and she danced a traditional dance from India. And we had another woman do another dance from Thailand. We had people from all over the world were sharing with one another and introducing one another to their cultures. And it was incredible. And so it was this moment of, yes, this is what I love. I love it when we can learn about each other's cultures in the spirit of curiosity and celebration, in the spirit of really enjoying the diversity that makes up this planet. How I got on this topic, I'm not quite sure, but I'm here now. And so that lesson, I think, of allowing yourself to be vulnerable up on stage is a hard one, but an important one. And so when I was watching The Lonely Few and I was watching these actors being very vulnerable, sometimes on stage, sometimes off stage, in the show within a play, it was powerful to me because it reminded me of all those times when I've been up on stage. And the point is that when there is this vulnerability, when there is this moment in time where you're thinking about how you're going to be in the world, being vulnerable is a challenge if it doesn't feel safe. And in the context of being on stage, being vulnerable can be unsafe. So, because I'd like to think that the audience is always with you, and when you're a professional musician, they're not always with you. Whenever you're on stage, you are taking your fate in your hands on some level to be vulnerable and to tell your story. So in this show, telling the story of the characters in the show was in some ways to me a sacred task. And all of the design around it, the music, what was written, somebody said that it was like listening to a combination of, the reason I say somebody said is I happened to, on the bus on the way home, I happened to run into the woman who was sitting next to me at the show. We just happened to be taking the same bus. And she said that the music felt like a cross between Lady Gaga and Joni Mitchell, which I just loved. I thought that was a great comparison. But the point is that in those moments when you're seeing this music play out and when you're seeing what happens to the characters, you want them to be cradled in safety because they are so vulnerable. And one of the things that I noticed was that the set did that. it provided a beautiful and safe backdrop. Even though there were times when things felt very uncertain and potentially very rocky, it always felt real to me, and it always felt like each one of the characters was being cradled by the direction of the show, and most importantly to me, the set. And I don't have any other way of describing it except that. And if you happen to be in New York City before, I believe, June sometime, and you have the opportunity to go see The Lonely Few, let me tell you who wrote what. The music and lyrics were by Zoe Sarnak. The book was by Rachel Bonds, and it was directed by Trip Cullman and Eleanor Scott. And it's at the MCC Theater, and it's called The Lonely Few. And I'm gonna go ahead and shout out the actors. I don't think there were any understudies last night, so the characters were played by Damon Dono, Taylor Iman Jones, Peter Mark Kendall, Lauren Patton, Helen J. Shen, and Thomas Silcott. There you go. And it was really quite something. And the set design, actually, let me see if I can find the set design. I see them all. Scenic design is Sybil Wickersheimer. Great name. Costume design, Samantha C. Jones. Lighting design, Adam Honore. Sound design, Jonathan Deans and Mike Tracy. Intimacy coordinator, Ann James. Dramaturge was Phaedra Michelle Scott, and the DEI consultant was Bliss Griffin of BG Consulting. And there's a whole bunch of other people who are in the music team, but I will not give all of that information to you. I recommend you see the show if you're at all interested in learning more about it. Anyway, so this is all my way of saying that when you're communicating, when you're interacting with people, the atmosphere that you create, the environment that you produce in order to tell the story isn't only about how do they need to hear it, it's also about what surrounds you. Is it safe? Is it open? Is it something that celebrates your differences as well as what makes you similar? All of that has to be true in order for you to have as advantageous, mutually advantageous experience as possible. I hope you've enjoyed today's show. It's short. I've got some really fun stuff happening on Monday. I'm very excited. I, at the moment, don't remember what the show is on Monday. But I'm very, very... Oh, yes. Keith Akers is on the show. That's the episode that's coming out on Mondays. Keith Akers, who is part of the movie Christspiracy. He was one of the people who was interviewed in that. But that's not exactly why he is on the show on Monday. I'm very excited to have him on the show. And I hope that you enjoy that episode, but I hope you enjoyed this one too. If you have questions, if you have thoughts, do me a favor, leave me a message on SpeakPipe. The link is in the show notes. This episode is, as always, brought to you by Brain FM, my favorite go-to app when it comes to meditation, productivity, creativity, you name it. And also, this podcast hosts Podbean. Alrighty. Until next time, this is Isolde Trachtenberg for the Creative Solutions Podcast, reminding you, as always, to be bold, be creative, and most of all, be kind. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the show if you're new, and it would mean the world to me if you told a friend about it. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2024. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope.